Welcome to the Business Resilience Decoded podcast, brought to you by Asfalis Advisors and the Disaster Recovery Journal. Crisis management in today's world is ever-changing, and this podcast is our commitment to help you navigate successful outcomes for any crisis you may face. I'm your host, Vanessa Matthews. I specialize in providing insights and solutions for crisis, continuity, and resilience across industries from real estate and healthcare to terrorism in the airline and transportation worlds. No matter what industry you're in, this podcast will provide you the tools to build resilience in your organization. Welcome back to another episode of the Business Resilience Decoded podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about leadership risks to prepare for. So in thinking about today's topic, there's 5 things that we've noticed over the past few months that we've seen as it relates to people and the risks from a people perspective within businesses and organizations. 5 of those things that we're seeing as common pain points in multiple organizations include growing through mergers and acquisitions. Every time we see a new business that's coming into a different type of city or an industry, or they're taking over something that may be existing, there's typically growth there that's coming through an M&A. So you're having to merge the people, the processes, the systems, et cetera. The second thing that we're seeing as a common pain point are organizations that are directly or indirectly impacted by labor unions. So we work in the supply chain space. And if you're looking and paying attention to the recent news, you've seen trucking businesses, as well as folks who deliver packages, as well as food supply chain companies are really having to negotiate and come to better terms with employees. Because of course, the risk is if we can't get access to products or services and or food, what does that impact from a global perspective, and how does that show up in your everyday community? The third pain point that we're seeing across people is stagnant culture and poor leadership development. So there's several organizations that we've been paying attention to that typically do not have an internal leadership and development program. And that can be fine because you can always outsource those things. But the concern is that it creates a stagnant culture. And typically, no one wants the word stagnant to be associated with their business. You want high performing, you want growth, you want innovation. And typically a stagnant culture does not yield you those results. And so we're seeing those things coming up a lot. The fourth pain point that we're hearing across multiple organizations are truly the lack of systems to read assessments that evaluate your leadership, your culture temperature, your risk and security assessments that is provided in a trusted instrument that, 1, you can understand, 2, that's backed by data and research, and 3, that is communicated in such a way that enables you to be able to move forward with a decision or a recommendation to secure what you need. And so we're seeing the lack of those systems prohibits organizations to be able to communicate and talk about some of the risks that they're seeing across those different verticals. And lastly, the 5th pain point that we're seeing from a people standpoint is around shifting at the leadership level. And so we're currently in a process right now where there's a huge changing of the guard. So there's a changing of the guard from a generational standpoint, but there's also a changing of the guard of money, right? So I was reading a healthcare company that we're partnering with. And as I was coming into the meeting, what I realized was there's key executives that are no longer working for that organization. Well, one of those executives had a salary of about $600,000 plus stock options. So if that person's no longer there, and the 7 of their peers who make comparable salaries to that person is no longer there, and where's that money going, right? And when they backfill those roles, if they backfill the role, 1, you're probably not going to come in at that salary. But then 2, if they decide not to backfill that role, or they replace that one person with 3 to 5 younger persons of talent, then it helps you to understand why this shift at the leadership level, mindset, culture, perspectives, those things all create impact and create challenges that businesses are going to have to walk into, coupled with all the other things that we're currently working with and the poly crisis of events. So the reason why this is important for this episode is that leadership is a major factor in how smoothly not only your business can run, but it's also a big factor in how smoothly your emergency management or business continuity or resilience programs are ran, are created, and are implemented. And so in today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about what are some of those top risks that we're seeing from a leadership perspective that you can prepare for to give you some insight to have a stronger team. A great article that we're going to be referencing a lot for this episode is coming from Forbes, and we'll put a copy of that in the show notes for you. And it's titled Navigating Leadership Challenges in a Rapidly Changing World. So the few of the things that we pulled out from this Forbes article that really tie into those 5 pain points that I just kind of talked through. The first risk is really the absence of cultivating emotional intelligence or EQ within the business and within your people and your talent. So your ability to be able to manage and regulate your emotions during a crisis or when things are highly stressful is very crucial for your business. And your ability to then read those emotions of others and help them is also crucial. So according to Forbes, EQ is so effective of others and helping manage them is so crucial that the overall success of the business can improve by 37% in 1 year just by improving EQ across your leadership team. Now, wait a minute. So if I have to put, 20 people, let's say $5,000 per seat in a class to teach me EQ to get a 37% return, I would do that because I can't find that in the stock market. So what's a simple way to look at what EQ looks like? So the other day I was flying on a plane. I was coming back from Washington, D.C. and I was sitting in my seat and there was turbulence. And y'all, I freaked out. It was way too much for me. And it was to the point where I wanted to grab onto somebody and hold them. Well, adjacent to me was a pilot sitting in across from me. So I said, okay. I looked at the pilot. The pilot is over there reading the paper, chilling, not freaking out, not concerned. If he was freaking out, he did not show it. And so what it told me was if this pilot is sitting back here with everybody else and he's not concerned about this turbulence, which was significant, I'm going to relax. And the moment the pilot starts to freak out is the moment that I'm going to freak out, right? So to me, that's a very commonplace example of what EQ looks like, right? Who's the person on your team when stuff goes haywire? They're just calm, cool, steady, and collected. In my household, that's my husband, is not me. The second thing that we're seeing from a leadership risk coming from the Forbes article is that avoiding continued learning and development, especially in your industry, can really be a major concern. So while we don't have to wait until you get another degree, the ability for you to attend webinars, take online classes, or listen to podcasts to sharpen your iron, to sharpen your muscle, to sharpen your insight, to be able to strategically think about what's happening in the world and how those things relate to your role is very critical. And here's why that's a concern. Those 5 pain points that I just touched on that we're seeing across multiple businesses, what happens is the first thing that goes is your training budget. So when there's times of crisis or scrutiny, we start pulling the dollars that are needed to help train our talent. Well, what kind of problem does that create? So as an example, we're in the process of interviewing #shameless plug at FlawlessAdvisors.com/careers if you are looking or know someone who is looking. I was interviewing a candidate a couple of weeks ago, and she's very strong in emergency management, not continuity of operations and BCP. And so she was very upfront. That's not my lane. I don't know how to do that. And that's our current need, right? So what I loved about her is she said, but hey, I talked to somebody on your team, and since I spoke with them a week ago, I'm already registered to get my certification. And I have 3 webinars coming up to teach me about business continuity and how I can apply it in the industries that As Follows works in. And so for me, it immediately showed me she's got a growth mindset. She's willing to learn. And she tapped into a need that we have. And instead of twiddling her thumbs and coming back to say, I don't know what that looks like, she was able to figure out a solution, which gave us more confidence that we made the right decision to hire her, right? So the ability for us to continue learning and development is critical. And I don't care what your title is or what your job is, everybody should always be continuing to learn. The third thing that we wanted to pull out from the Forbes article is all around not investing in employees and their well-being, right? That's a huge concern. We have to have teams that are rested, that are ready, and that are responsive during a crisis and afterwards, which means that we need to be invested in their wellness, creating wellness programs and incentives, inviting guest speakers to come and speak, providing nutrition and fitness when we have events and not just drinks or alcohol or fried food. Encouraging your workers to take breaks and to have time off can really go a long way. We have a person on our team who just relocated to the other side of the world. And through their transition, she took 2 or 3 weeks off. And so I said, great, we'll see you in 3 weeks. And so she really struggled with that. And I said, no, like, do not come back. I don't want to see you. You need to go away. Vacation means vacate. I'll see you later. It was really hard for her to unplug. And so I told her, I said, hey, here's a little bit of feedback. The next time you go on vacation, I want you to delete your Slack from your phone. I want you to delete your Outlook. And if I hear from you, we're going to have a problem because you really need to go away and go on vacation, because when I'm on vacation, you cannot find me. And I have one cell phone and I do not answer it. I will not. And so I think it's really important for us to hold our teams accountable too, because sometimes we have some worker bees and that's great, but go do something else. And even if it's you sit at home and I don't know, figure it out, but take a break from work. It's necessary. And I think coming out of COVID, that's one big thing I saw was there were so many people that had a lot of burnout, which was not healthy. The fourth thing I want to pull out from the Forbes article is that not being proactive about social issues and what that creates in our society in today's environment. So we have another episode where we'll go a little bit deeper into that. But the Forbes article makes a great point that you want to be clear on your stance about anything, about where you stand before you are forced to make a statement or provide a response. And you want to be able to pinpoint and go back to your mission, your vision, and your values to be able to back that statement up. So why is this important? Well, the reality is we're in a day and age where affirmative action is on the table. And what's happening from a higher ed perspective has the potential, and in some cases already is, affecting corporations. So I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago speaking on a panel with supplier diversity teams, and their biggest concern is what happens when supplier diversity programs to help minority businesses, LGBTQIA, women-owned, you pick a demographic, right? What happens if these programs are not available and we can't help these small businesses and minority businesses grow and get contracts? And so the question came up, right? And so what's happening is there's a lot of organizations that are in a space where they're not speaking out, or they are, and they have decided to fight these issues and these causes. Today, I don't want to debate and get into that conversation. We can save that for a deeper dive. But what Forbes is hitting on, and which goes back to leadership risks that you have to prepare for, what we need to understand as a society is there's a certain generation that is in the workplace that has an expectation and that has a set of core values that it's different than the previous generations that we've worked with. And so if you're going to be successful in recruiting and retaining your top talent and having a positive culture that people want to be there, you being able to speak up about what's important to you and what matters to you is critical. Same way in my marriage, right? There's certain things that matter in our household and it is a non-negotiable, and this is how we operate here. The same thing carries over in your business. And the inability for us to be able to talk through those things and to have employers who speak up on key issues or their values will put you in a position that's not going to be productive or effective for the long-term growth of your business. So top things that we want you to have on your mind, because business continuity is at a crucial point and you all have a seat at the table, and it's important that we bring these issues to the top minds of leadership. So question for you as we transition: how are you preparing for these risks? We would love to hear your thoughts on this episode in the comments on YouTube or on LinkedIn. And until next time, we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for listening to the Business Resilience Decoded podcast, brought to you by Asfalis Advisors and Disaster Recovery Journal. Make sure you check out the show notes for this episode to see all the upcoming events, programs, and ways we can support you. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, leave us a review, and share it with a friend. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you in the next episode.